I think that's a pretty good, valid argument to why we charge for quotes, and we take the time to do them properly, fully itemise them so you can see exactly what is and isn't included. So you know right up front of what's in there and what's not in there. So if you've got all that detail in front of you, you can go through it. If someone gives you a price that just says, I'm going to do your job for X dollars, then you've got nothing to compare it to, and you don't know what's included and what's not included in that quote. And that's where people need to sort of understand that there's a lot of variables and there's a lot of things that can change along the way. And if they've got a quote that just gives them a price, they really need to get back to that guy, whoever it is, and get him to itemise everything so they know what is and isn't included, so they compare it with the other quotes.
Thinking about building or renovating? Or maybe you are already knee-deep in a project now. Are you feeling unsure of which steps to take and if you are making the right calls? You're not alone. Welcome to Builders Beyond Borders, the podcast where experienced Aussie builders share real stories, insider tips, and practical advice so you can build with confidence, avoid costly mistakes, and actually enjoy the journey. Let's dive in.
Howdy, everybody. Welcome to another session of Builders Beyond Borders. My name's Paul from Independent Building Solutions in Canberra, and today I've got Hugh from New Realm Homes down in Melbourne with me, and Shannon from DJH Builders in Tasmania. And we're going to have a bit of a chat about the quoting process and talk about why cheaper prices often mean higher risk and they're not always the best way to go, and how homeowners should compare the scope and not the price. But a lot of the time, builders don't explain to them actually what happens behind the scenes and the difference between all those things. So I'll go over to you, Shannon, and we'll get started with what your thoughts are around that area.
Yeah, so only just this week I've had a couple of conversations which have been from one end of the scale to the other. People sort of question why would I not go with the cheapest quote? Like, I've got 7 quotes sitting in front of me. Why would I just not choose the cheapest one? And why on earth would you be charging quotes? So it was a really good opportunity for me to, I guess, refine my skills in explaining why it's so important that an estimate that you receive from a builder, that you know exactly what's in it, and comparing. You've got to be comparing apples with apples, because so many quotes have so many hidden costs, even to the point where, why do we charge for quotes? And I went in to explain to this guy that as builders, we get paid for our time. We pay ourselves each week a wage. If most of the time spent quoting, that money has to come from somewhere. So is it hidden? Is it put into their overheads and then put on every job that they do that they actually secure? Or is it that they have a fee that's hidden into your quote that then if they don't win that quote, it gets passed on to the next quote that they do? So it's just such a grey area. And I think with especially us charging for quotes, it's so transparent that fee for us to come out, the time to prepare that estimate is just, it's covered in someone paying for a service. It's like a consultation service, as I guess you're asking for someone's professional advice on what to do. They're spending hours and hours putting together, even weeks sometimes putting together these estimates. And people expect that in the industry typically to be done for free. And that is just one component of an estimate, and comes into, is that included in the other 7 quotes that I've got sitting here? Or where are even their overheads? Like, do they know what their overheads are? Then that comes down to questions about, will this building company still be around before the end of my project? That's how we see it, and that's how we make the industry sustainable, because we are costing out for what we do, and it's transparent, and we know exactly what our overheads are, and we know exactly what we're charging for at what stage, and it just makes it a much better experience for everyone. And then there's the quotes that I say I could give you a price over the phone for this roughly $500,000 project. What's it going to mean? Like, it's not even written on paper, but what does it mean to you if I tell you it's going to be 500,000 and you've got quotes sitting there for 550 and you choose me? Like, we sign a contract and we get started and we go, oh, no, I didn't include that. No, that wasn't covered in there. and at the end of the job, you're up for 650,000. Like, it's not a nice experience for anyone. So having systems and processes around estimating, around time spent, around costing for every hour of every project is just vital for the success of a building company, and that then in turn is the success of our clients' experience and their project getting completed.
Yeah, and I think that's a pretty common thing, pretty common theme that everyone sort of hears all the time about how prices always blow out, jobs always cost more than they should, and a lot of that reason, a lot of that is behind the reason people take the cheapest quote and then realise that there's stuff in there that hasn't been included. And I think that's a pretty good, valid argument to why we charge for quotes, and we take the time to do them properly, fully itemised, so you can see exactly what is and isn't included. So you know right up front of what's in there and what's not in there. So if you've got all that detail in front of you, you can go through it. If someone gives you a price that just says, I'm going to do your job for X dollars, then you've got nothing to compare it to, and you don't know what's included and what's not included in that quote. And that's where people need to sort of understand that there's a lot of variables and there's a lot of things that can change along the way. And if they've got a quote that just gives them a price, they really need to get back to that guy, whoever it is, and get him to itemise everything so they know what is and isn't included, so they compare it with the other quotes. You can't compare, like you say, apples with apples if they're not all the same. So what's your take on that, Hugh? You've got a few stories, I'm sure, from.
Oh, look, I think we've all got some marvelous stories of the amount of times that we've actually had conversations with people, and the question has always come up: oh, why am I getting a fee to for you to quote this? And just like sort of Shannon's just explained, there is that aspect of, well, without putting it so bluntly as this, do you go to work for free? And sometimes that is pretty much all it comes down to, because if the expectation is that these are all done for free because people have gone and done projects before, and is that quoting cost included in each project? And is that fee then put on there? What would that fee be on every single project? If somebody's sitting around and they're doing 50 quotes a year, and you may only get, say, 5 projects out of that 50, that's not a very good percentage. And if you're spending, and let's just say that 50, it's taking them a week to do each quote, and that might cost in excess of, just in wages or on somebody to do up the estimate and do all the work that's involved in actually pricing everything accurately, you might be up for anywhere of $50,000 or anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 in wages and fees and that sort of thing for being able to produce that quote. Well, what happens with that? Does that get tacked on to a percentage onto each project? So those people that are getting that free quote, somebody's always paying that in some way, shape or form. And that could be over those 5 projects. That's next 20 grand on your project.
And if that's not accounted for, if they're not putting it into, say, their overheads, like they're still paying themselves a wage. So where does that come from? Does it come out of the team's wages and then they can't work? They won't work because they're not getting paid? Like, where does it come from?
Yeah. And this all goes back to that classic thing of people driving around in the 1950s and trying to drum up some work and going, oh, free quotes. And that's just become the industry norm. And look, I'm not going to knock that free quotes, people are doing them and what's the value in them. Unfortunately, we know that the value comes from people that are doing the free quotes. They're doing them late at night. They're not going to be doing them accurately. They're going to try and fast track them so that they've got majority of stuff covered. But there's going to be little details that are missed. And like you sort of alluded to there as well, is that what happens when it's priced too low because something's been missed? Who's the one that ends up losing out? Either the client, or 9 times out of 10, the builder will turn around and they'll end up losing money and the builder goes out of business. And then what happens to you if your house is not completed or something like that, just because of one simple clerical error? And it could have been fixed because then somebody's actually doing the right thing, charging for the time to prepare the quote. Then things aren't missed. You get a detailed scope of works, and that's probably the biggest part of any quoting process is that scope of works. And making sure that is accurate. Things have been accounted for. And as a homeowner, your essentially due diligence is going through and making sure you got a detailed scope. so that things aren't missed. Because then if there are questions while you're doing the quoting process, it's going to be surrounded by, hey, look, we've gone through the scope. I think we've missed a few things here, or you've allowed for this, but this other builder hasn't allowed for that. So, okay, the free quote over here doesn't have that in there, but yours does. Why does yours have that in there? Because if we don't have that in there, could be a variation later on. Do you want a surprise later on, and your bill goes in higher than what that other guy's quoted by a substantial amount, and possibly even higher than what we're quoting, because it's something that's been missed, and there's other issues that come along from that variation.
Yeah, well, that's why you need a detailed proposal, because then you can look through and say, that if there's ever a dispute comes up or you question anything, and you say, look, well, it's right there, or no, it's not there. Whereas if you haven't got a detailed proposal, you've got nothing to compare it to. So,
yeah, those one-page quotes, and I think we've all seen plenty of them. Probably one of the classic ones many years ago, getting asked to look at a little sort of bathroom renovation, and there'd been another builder that had sort of come in and done the work, and it was abysmal, and being shown essentially their contract was a double-sided piece of paper. That was the contract, and it was everything that was outside of contract terms that we'd normally see, and outside of legislation, like asking for a 30% deposit up front, and then another 2 payments, and you're sort of seeing this just going, holy, like this is so not right. And the level of detail that was in here, we'll be doing basically 3 items. We'll be stripping out your bathroom and putting in a new one. That was essentially the scope of works. Nothing else. And, okay, it was just a bathroom, but it led to a lot of things. Now, I don't know what happened in. They went to VCAT and all that sort of thing over that, and I don't know what ended up happening, but I just provided a report at the time just to show what was going on. And yeah, these things happen from those one-page, single-page documents, and problems that arise from that can just be horrendous.
A bathroom's a perfect example too, because smallest room in the house, but you've got tiling and fittings and taps and waterproofing and shower screens, and it goes on and on, doesn't it? So you've got to make sure that's all covered. It's not, because obviously it depends on the size of the project. Sometimes you can get away with a quick free quote of 185 minutes if it's a small job. So it's all depends on what you're doing. But if you've got something that's, if you want someone to put a new front door on for you, say, well, here's a free quote, take you 5 minutes, it's going to cost this much. That's not what we do most of the time in the building industry. You're providing all trades all the way from the draftsman through to the cleaner, aren't you? So you've got to make sure you itemise what is and what isn't included. So, and yeah, bathrooms are a perfect example. Like I say, it's a smallest room in the house, but it's got the most trades, or it's got all the trades that need to come through, don't they?
Yeah, that's right, in a small amount of time. So it can rapidly rack up in variations if nothing is covered in the scope of works. Like it'll be like, we found this today, we found that tomorrow, and we found that next day. Like nothing that's been accounted for, like upgrading and plumbing and all that sort of stuff that gets uncovered in bathrooms. And it's taken us like 3 years to refine our bathroom estimation template that we use. Like it's always evolving. Like that's something that's also worked on behind the scenes, is like refining these templates, because things change, prices change all the time. So there's so many different variables that need to be assessed. You can't just use one estimate template as we do in our estimating software and just hang on to it for 10 years and just keep using the same one. Like it's always got to be looked at and refined, and we deal with all the suppliers and all the subcontractors whose prices change and their terms change, and what they're doing is different, and then the legislation changes and we have to upgrade that. So it's just an evolutionary system.
Well, the costs of your fixtures and fittings can vary so much too. So that's another perfect example why people need to compare their quotes, don't they? Because if you've got allowances in there, or if you've specified what you're using, you can pay anywhere from $500 to $5,000 for a vanity, or the same thing with a shower screen or whatever the case may be. So if someone's allowing $500 for the vanity and $500 for the shower screen, and you're allowing a couple of thousand for each, well, of course your price is going to be more. People need to understand why it's more. Not the fact that, they're cheaper, we're going to go with them. Well, you can go with them, but you're only going to get cheap stuff, and it might not be what you want. And then if you go and pick something that's going to be more, all of a sudden they're only going to add it on anyway, and the price will end up the same as ours. That's where people need to understand what the scope is and learn how to read it. And I think it's a builder's responsibility probably to make sure we advise people and go over that and explain it to them, because people just don't understand that stuff a lot of them. If they haven't done it before, especially if they've done it before, people are a little bit more wary of how it works.
And another thing worth mentioning with subbies and suppliers and stuff, especially with vanities and joinery and things, we're having a meeting with our joiners today about the time delay between someone bringing a set of concept plans to us for an extension or renovation. But it can be that we're pricing, we're going to the joiner for a quote now, but the job won't start for another 10, 12 months. And then, but the pricing that's locked in that we've got from the joiner now, we signed the contract in October, we start in Feb next year. Like the joiners, all the subs that we deal with, the 8 to 10 subs that will be on that job, are all looking like, oh, that estimate expired, 11 months ago. Are they going to warrant it, or is that cost just put on to the builder? So those sorts of things can, if they're not monitored, can be put into a variation for the client. And that's like, we'd agreed on a contracted price, or the builder just wears it. Those conversations are super important to have with subbies, to stay on top and make sure your systems work in together. You're not in the same company. Like it's those, the behind the scenes stuff, which is so critical to get an accurate costing. That's just joinery.
Well, that probably even steps into the next part when it comes to contracting and what's been allocated for where, because that'll all be specified and that sort of thing in your contracts, whether it's a provisional sum or a prime cost item or anything like that. And I don't know about you guys, but when it comes to joinery, we're always putting that in as a provisional sum, because that can change drastically from the time that we do actually price it. And while we do make a little bit of an allowance, and there's always going to be a percentage when we, as you say, we could be looking 12 months out before it actually gets, contracted, but also goes down that road of actually, okay, well, we're engaging the joiner now. And he comes back and he says, oh, well, our prices have jumped by 2% or something. Then when it comes to that, we've got to make that allowance right at the start. Go, okay, well, we've got the joiner's amount. It might be $20,000 for the joinery of a kitchen, let's just say. And we've got to make an allowance. Okay, well, let's just put a percentage on there at the moment, because we know that we're going to be 12 months out before this contracts. Then, okay, put that on there and just make sure we've got that allowance, because we know that the price is going to rise. And whether somebody does something silly around the world, like another COVID situation or something silly that we all know is going on, and it could change the prices drastically just from something as simple as the
control.
Well, you've got to make sure you document that too, I guess, and put in what your time frame is for your quotes. And if you've got joinery, like I say, we pretty much always have it as a provisional as well, because it's not finalised at the start of the job. If it is finalised at the start of the job, then you have a quote from your joiner, and he will have an expiry date on that quote normally as well, and things like that. So you should make sure you point all that stuff out to your clients, don't you? Explain to them how that all works so they understand it. I think after COVID, like you mentioned, a lot of people start to realise that prices can actually rise, because I find clients talking about that a lot more than they used to. I always say, oh, yeah, prices are always going up, aren't they? People say to me, I never used to get that before COVID. So that's an interesting one. Yeah. But that's been great, guys. I think we might wind it up there then. Great to have a chat, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to Builders Beyond Borders. If today's episode helped you feel more prepared, clearer, or more confident, share it with a mate who's planning their own build or reno. Got a question about building, renovating, or working with tradies? Send it our way. We might cover it in a future episode. And don't forget to hit follow or subscribe so you never miss the real stories, practical tips, and builder insights we've got coming your way. Everything shared on this podcast is based on our experiences and those of our guests. It's general info only. Any reliance on the information provided is done at your own risk.